Hello, everyone. We're going to take a few more minutes to let some additional attendees join, and then we'll get started. All right, we see that the conference is starting to fill up, and we'll start in roughly 2 minutes. All right, a couple of administrative items. As we're going through the conference, just to maintain the flow, we're not going to open the floor up to questions at any time. By all means, though, feel free to type your questions into the chat. If there's anything pressing midway through the presentation, we will take a short pause to answer some questions, and at the end, we'll have additional time to respond to any questions that come up. And 1 more minute, and then we're going to begin. All right, let's get started. We've got a lot to talk about. So hello, everyone. My name is Nadav Zivolin. I'm a managing partner at Analytical Factor. Before that, I was with Oracle for many years. I know quite a few of you, and for those I don't, hello. Today, we're going to talk about forecast accuracy. why is it important, some best practices and how to measure it, and how essentially to get the most out of your demand management cloud implementations or considerations when you're thinking about accuracy. So let's dive on it. So when we talk about forecast accuracy, everyone says, yes, I want to have high accuracy, my accuracy is great, but when you start talking to people about why is it important to have good accuracy, or when you improve your accuracy, what are your impacts to your business, that gets fuzzier. So we've done some research, we've looked around, it's kind of our bread and butter, and I want to share some information with you. So a Gartner report that came out a couple of years ago shows that for every 1% forecast accuracy improved, they saw several factors that could improve. Decrease in order to delivery days, a reduction in inventory, reduction in transportation costs, and inventory obsolescence. So while forecast accuracy is this theoretical number that you strive to and you want to make better, all these other metrics have real world dollars, often enough a lot of dollars tied to them. So when you're thinking about accuracy, the way I like visualizing it is something like this. If I could reduce my forecast error by 5 percentage points, my inventory carrying cost goes down by 10%. Transportation cost goes down by 15%. And obsolescence goes down by almost 20 due to increased inventory turns and just improved efficiency throughout the supply chain. Now, you know your company's best. You know how much money is tied up in inventory, in transportation costs, and obsolescence. Now, think about what kind of impact to your bottom line making an improvement in forecast could have. So that's how I always like starting the conversation. Really think about not just the theoretical, I want to have great accuracy or I want to improve my accuracy. What does improving my accuracy do to me? How does it make my company, my business unit better? And there's real serious financial impacts of making accuracy a priority. A couple more pieces of information. So forecast errors can cause an increase of up to 30% in organizational cost. Think about it. 30% of organization cost tied to forecast error, and the fact that if you have too much inventory or too high a forecast, you've got excess stock, excess manpower, and you need to discount prices. And on the flip side, if you've got insufficient availability on a specific product, specific date, you're losing sales, potentially losing market share, and there's a bunch of rippling effects. So there's real world implications to good and poor accuracy. So let's talk about some best practices in measuring accuracy. Because you can measure accuracy in lots of different ways, lots of different levels. So my first question that always comes up is, well, where should I measure accuracy? Should I measure at this aggregate level because it looks good? Should I measure at this really detailed level but that looks ugly? And my recommendation, the best practices out there, focus on the level where the rubber hits the road. Focus on the level where you actually need to make sure you've got the right product in the right place at the right time, right? That's the crux of the planning. Product, location, and time. So wherever you actually need to make sure there's inventory in the warehouse to make a shipment, or you need to make sure the truck arrives at the customer's site when it was requested, that level is where you need to measure accuracy. You can obviously aggregate it up and report it later, but that initial evaluation of am I accurate or not needs to happen at the level that is most meaningful to your business. Then you take that measurement, you can roll it up, you can report for an entire enterprise, a single business unit, you can slice and dice, but really that initial decision of where to measure is super, super important. And then you really want to focus on measuring your metrics of accuracy over time. When folks come to me and say, I've got 72% accuracy, is that good? Well, the sad answer is, well, it depends. It really comes down to what's going on with your competitors. What is the norm for your industry? Some industries, like printed media, have 85 to 90% accuracy. Some industries, like high-tech manufacturing, depending on the vertical, can be at 40% accuracy. It really depends. There's just different challenges and different aspects of the products and the demand patterns. So really focus on not just, I need a single snapshot, is my accuracy good or bad? Measure your accuracy and track it over time. The real measurement of, are we doing well, are we doing poorly, is where does your accuracy go over time? If you start with an accuracy of 60 and over 6 months you've brought it up to 70, 75, fantastic. If you started at 82 and over the last year it's hit at 82, well, maybe there's room for improvement. If it's declining, that's definitely a red kind of warning light that you need to take a look at. Take a look at your accuracy. Make sure to measure it every reporting cycle. And what really is best practice, share that information. You don't have to share every single slice or view of accuracy, but as an enterprise, with your leadership, go in, decide on what's the most meaningful way to report on accuracy and share that. So every cycle, let's say once a month, everyone in the company who needs and wants to know how well we're doing from an accuracy perspective has access to that information. Some common ways to measure accuracy. By no means these are the only ways, but these are very common. Mean forecast error, typically known as bias. Bias lets you know if you're systemically over or under. It's one of those metrics that you want to be as close to zero and realistically could be quite close to zero. MAD is kind of the total of your error, and one most of you are familiar with are MAPE and WMAPE. Essentially, you've picked the level you want to calculate your accuracy at, you've evaluated it, and now you want to roll up that number. Do you want to use MAPE or weighted MAPE? It's a business decision, and when you do weighted MAPE, typically their two common options are either by units or by some sort of cost or price element. When say folks want to know what should I weigh my demand by, my recommendation is if your product's costs or sales prices are fairly homogeneous, meaning that let's say your lowest selling item and your highest selling item aren't more than let's say 5 to 10x apart, then yeah, quantity is probably reasonable. You care about meeting all orders, whether it's a $2 item or an $8 item. On the other hand, if you've got a dramatic gap between some of your product costs, you're selling 5-cent bolts and $20,000 engines, yeah, an error of 1 unit in the $20,000 engines probably outweighs an error of 1,000 units in the bolts. So you do want to bring a cost element into the calculation. Now, talking about error. I've been in plenty of conferences and plenty of meetings. Someone stands up and kind of puffs out their chest and says, our accuracy is 99%. If you've been around long enough, you know that's fishy. That's problematic. Chances are, if your accuracy is super, super high, you're probably not measuring the right thing. Then you'll ask some questions. You go, so what are you measuring? Well, we're measuring dollar amounts by brand, by quarter. Great. So you predicted you're going to sell 137 million for the quarter and end up being 139. All right. So 99% accuracy. What does that really mean for your business, for your enterprise? Were you short on some products and had too much of, sold more of others? Did you have to spend a ton of money expediting products from one warehouse to the other? All that information is lost here. You have a number, it looks good, but it's not really meaningful. In contrast, you might be measuring your accuracy at item, customer site, and week. So making sure you've kind of delivered everything you need to deliver to the customer site when they asked for it, and your accuracy is 50%. That might be okay based on the demand patterns that your customers have, based on just the underlying behavior that your products have, and just seasonal variability. This might be pretty good. So it really depends. So my recommendation here is really don't pick a level that's going to give you a pretty number. It makes you feel good, but it's not really going to help you improve your business or improve your planning process. Focus on the level that's really actionable, that's really meaningful, and accept the fact that it is what it is. You have a starting accuracy number. And the goal should be to say, yeah, this is pretty good, or how do I go about improving it? That's really the crux here. How do I go about improving my accuracy? Now, a lot of you here are part of the Oracle ecosystem, whether that's on-prem the mantra, the new cloud offerings, or just thinking about joining the family. So a couple of years ago, Oracle started on this journey, more than a couple, 5 to 7 years ago, and said, we're going to take all our applications, our ERP, and shift them all to the cloud. Our customers are struggling with cost of ownership, complexity, upgrades, security. There's lots and lots of issues, and the future is moving everything we do to be on the cloud. And about 2 years ago, they released Oracle Demand Management Cloud, ODMC, you might hear some people refer to it. And that's essentially a product that leverages the decades of experience from ODP, from the mantra, seeing what other folks are doing, and moving that knowledge and those capabilities into a cloud-based platform using best practices and more modern solutions and user experience. Now, so I'm going to talk about just some things that make the cloud experience different than what was available before. In this offering, they've really tightly coupled and integrated demand and supply, meaning that a single planner, much like the market's going where you've got the planners or both demand and supply planners, can do both tasks seamlessly using the same UI. If you so desired, you can even with a click of one button run a plan and generate a demand forecast using a statistical engine and then release it to a supply planning engine and see the impacts on your supply chain. Typically, you still want to pause between them, but you've still got the capabilities, and that's very powerful. I mentioned that term plan. So in the mantra, you had your worldview of all the data in the world. Each planner had the responsibilities that go in, that tweak the forecast, and that forecast changed real time. And that was a little bit of a challenge if you want to do some what-if analysis. You want to compare different scenarios. You want to see, well, I've got my upcoming year plan, but I want to see what happens if I think I'm going to have a good year. What about if I think I'm going to have a bad year? I want to actually try different scenarios out, look at them side by side, and not have it just kind of impact my downstream. So that's where the concept of plan comes in. In Demand Management Cloud, there's a strong plan component. You can use it to manage individual planning cycles, and it's most powerful when used to evaluate different what-if scenarios. They took the mantra engine, which was deemed to be one of the best-in-class statistical engines for demand planning, and they've kind of refined it and enhanced it for the cloud. And a big difference you'll see is when a user logs into the cloud, you've got these dashboards. And you can either use the seated ones. My recommendation is actually look at what the seated ones offer, talk to your business, and see what sort of KPIs, graphs, info tiles they would benefit most day in, day out, and tweak that seated offering to be what they want. And there's a high level of configurability. You can control your measures, you can control your tables, you can control your graphs. So you can really tailor this to match your demand planning process. So that's all really powerful and really robust. From a forecasting perspective, specifically statistical forecasting, the focus when shifting to the cloud is take all the flexibility you had on-prem and make it more friendly, make it more accessible to a user or a super user, and make it less dependent on expertise that only a few people out there have. You can control the level at which the forecast is generated. You can control the forecasting methods. You can control the causal factors. You can control forecasting parameters. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about these. So first, forecasting methods. ODMC comes with 15 forecasting methods enabled, and something that's new is not only can you see this from your web-based browser, not having to go to an administrative tool, the dreaded business modeler, you can also see the internal parameters of these models, something that used to be hidden and harder to access. So now you can just see for a given forecasting profile, these are the active models, and understand more what the engine is doing. Causal factors. And for folks who aren't familiar with causal factors, another way to think about it is the concept of demand driver. Essentially, the information that will tell the statistical engine why demand varied up and down over time. It could be seasonality, it could be trend, it could be pricing, it could be promotions, it could be things that are unique to your business. All of these things can be defined as causal factors. Two big changes in the cloud is one, causal factors are no longer tied to these complex back-end expressions that you need pedigree and PLSQL to understand. Now everything is tied to measures, what used to be called series. What does that mean? Is if you're unsure what the engine's seeing for a given causal factor, you want to see what demand signal the engine's seeing. You want to see what information is kind of giving it a signal, demand went up, demand went down. You can now just create a table or a graph and visualize that information very, very easily. So there's less confusion and less kind of black box behavior in the engine. The same has been done for forecasting parameters. On-prem, you used to go in and see kind of a bunch of lists that totaled up to roughly 165, 170 parameters. And that was usually pretty overwhelming. Folks try to read up on the parameters to understand what they did, but more often than not, they would pick a parameter that's not impactful, or they wouldn't understand some of the interaction between the parameters, and they wouldn't get the output they were expecting, and that led to a lot of frustration, and sometimes actually trying to make the forecast better made it worse. So the focus here was to take this, and while it's still pretty complicated, try to simplify it. So a couple of things were done. One, when a person goes in and looks at the parameters, they don't see this dauntingly long list. Initially, they see, I think, roughly 15 parameters. These were deemed the most impactful and most relevant to people trying to modify the engine. So these are the ones that are seen front and center. Behind the scenes, if you want access to more parameters, you can get access to another 25 or so, bring your total to roughly 40 parameters. These are the parameters that have been deemed effective, useful, relevant for the cloud, etc. So instead of seeing 170 parameters, we now see a much more focused list. The names have been revised, descriptions have been improved, so it's easier to figure out what these do when you're trying to improve the forecast. The last thing I'm going to talk about from ODMC kind of being a focused improvement is improved analysis. One of the biggest complaints about the on-premise engines throughout the years is that they're too much of a black box. We get a forecast, it looks good, it looks bad, but I don't understand what the system is doing. And if a planner doesn't understand where a forecast is coming from, they can't stand up and defend it. They can't examine it and say, no, this looks fishy. They're just going to shrug and go, well, the number looks okay, but I'm going to override it because I know where that override comes from. It's from my own intuition. It's from my own business intelligence. I can stand up in a meeting and defend that number. So I'm just going to go with that number. So in the cloud, there's a bunch of things that have been exposed and are easily accessible to the users. You can very quickly see which forecast methods were used to generate a forecast. You can see their weights, and you can see something really cool called decomposition. For example, in this graph, I'm showing not just my total forecast, which is the total of these bars, but how much of the forecast came from the forecasting methods that were used. So in this case, transformation regression and regression were about 50-50 contributors, and then modified ridge regression added a little bit. So not only are you seeing how much the forecast is, you can see which models participated in the forecast and how much they contributed. You can also very easily see things like what level the forecast was generated at, if outliers were detected and data was smoothed, when did that happen, and kind of what kind of smoothing was used. And you can see also causal decomposition. So if you've got a variety of causal factors, you don't just want to see my forecast for next month fits 1,000. How much of that 1,000 is driven by the price change I initiated? You can actually see your forecast decomposed into sub-elements. And that's all very insightful and informative and helps make the number generated by a statistical engine, which is still pretty complicated, a lot more easy to parse and understand. So we talked about all the good things. Let's talk about a few challenges. So the biggest challenge with demand management cloud, it's still pretty complicated. As part of the offering, they took some of the key capabilities that were in the mantra. They actually took some key capabilities that were in the ODP that were missing in the mantra and folks really wanted to have, and put them all into this very powerful tool. Now this tool is also new, meaning there isn't a lot of experience out there. So if you're trying to find a dedicated resource, either in-house or a consultant who knows all the ins and outs of this new product, it's harder to find. It's a skill set that's still kind of being gained across the industry. There isn't a ton of detailed documentation. The documentation is there, it's web-friendly, it's great, but it doesn't go very deep. So if you need to know really detailed information about how forecast is allocated, what a parameter does, what the engine does in each of its individual internal steps, there isn't a lot of information about that. So this all comes together with, there's more information of what the engine did, but if you're really trying to triage or analyze a specific forecast, it's hard to get to that information. This is further coupled with the fact that doing out-of-sample testing in the cloud is more challenging. When the engine spits out WMATE values, they're in sample. I'll give you the 30-second explanation. In sample is essentially a metric is generated for accuracy based on data that the engine already knows about. So let's say you had data up to and including August 2019. The engine looks at all this data, and then when it generates the forecast, it'll give you a MAPE value. That MAPE value is based on historical data. There's no holdout period. So the engine gives you information, and the WMAPE values that are kind of just spit out by the system are not necessarily the best indicators of whether a forecast is going to be accurate or not. So this whole concept of holding back information, running the engine, seeing how well it's performed against that is more challenging on the cloud. Let's talk about some just concepts and best practices around improving accuracy. So the first thing you want to do is benchmark your current state. We talked about picking the right level of measuring your accuracy. So pick that level, have some discussions, and see where you're at. I'm a strong proponent, and it really is best practice to measure your accuracy both with the statistical forecast and final forecast. Well, you'll say, but at the end of the day, we produce or we plan based on the final forecast. Yes, but if you don't measure, you don't know. That's kind of our stance. The expectation is that you're going to generate a statistical forecast, which is hopefully pretty good. And then the planners should be applying business intelligence where appropriate and making the forecast better. And that's pretty much the norm. But it's not always the case. Meaning, you might have parts of the business, and for a variety of reasons, whether leadership pressures, whether sales constraints, whether other factors, where the overrides that are being applied are actually not making the forecast better. They're making it worse or they're not improving it. Well, that's something that needs to be identified and dealt with. So it's really important to measure both statistical forecast accuracy and final forecast. Why? Because at the end of the day, planners are busy. They've got lots and lots of things they need to take care of. You want to get to a statistical forecast that runs on autopilot for a medium to large percentage of your products, let's say 80% plus. And then for the products that are critical to the business and the products where accuracy is poor, that's when a planner steps in, applies their intelligence, and really undertakes the highest value added tasks they can. So measuring statistical and final forecast is critical to kind of streamlining that process. After you've done this, you need to think, what's going to get me to a better place? And that's going to vary from organization to organization. And then look at what's going to get you to a better place and come up with some immediate, medium, and long-term goals. And for some companies, immediate might be, I want the statistical engine to be more accurate. For others, it might be, I need to bring in sales forecast into the system. You might decide some of my medium goals should be, let's get inventory on hand as a measure in my system. Why? Because customer demand patterns are tied to how much they have in inventory. So if the planner has access to that information, they can decide whether or not the current forecast is appropriate. Long-term goals could be things like bringing in additional causal factors, looking if POS data is any sort of strong indicator of demand. Could be a variety of things. So really think about what's going to be most impactful to your forecast, whether it's statistical or final, and kind of make a plan. Good accuracy isn't an action, it's a journey. And that journey will have lots of twists and turns, and it will change over time based on your corporate strategy, based on just where you're at. So come up with a plan, review it every 6 months, every 12 months, and keep attacking the most immediate and effective elements to get you a better forecast. Make sure that your configuration is aligned with your business goals. If your business goals are, well, let's really try to make sure we've got the right product at the right place at the right time, and my demand is very sparse or spiky, well, generate a spiky forecast. If you say, no, I just want to make sure I've got weeks of supply in place, do that. If you're forecasting shipments, but you really want to make sure your bookings fulfillment rate is really high, maybe there's a misalignment there. So make sure whatever you're doing to generate a forecast is well aligned with your business goals. And then actually start modifying the forecast, acting on those steps you decide on, and evaluate impacts. Really, focus on measuring your accuracy over time. And some months will be better, some months will be worse. Some months are going to be absolute stinkers, and it happens. Why? There's usually some sort of shortage, a strike, it happens. But if you don't measure, you don't know. If you don't measure, you don't have the right tools to improve. and make sure you get a champion to drive this process, whether it's an internal champion, an external champion, someone of the expertise around how to measure accuracy, how to improve accuracy, and really get them engaged. So let's talk about working with us, Analytical Factor, a little bit. What are our typical offerings? We've been around for a while. We've done lots of different things, but our two primary areas of focus are forecast tuning and education. So forecast tuning, what do we do there? We first sit down with you and we look at where are you at now. We help you, or we generate an initial evaluation of your current accuracy. Say, all right, you're at 62% accuracy for a given lag, for a given measurement level. We believe we can get you to 78 with some sort of engagement. And then we'll help you build the ROI use case of this is what the benefits to your company would be if your accuracy went from 62% to 78. And it's amazing when you put these numbers in, like, just evaluate them from a monetary impact, the ROI on such an endeavor is usually tremendous. Once that's been done and a kind of green light for tuning has happened, we'll go in, we'll talk to the business, we'll evaluate the configuration to ensure it's both best practice and aligned with business goals. And then we take an iterative approach where we evaluate the forecast, both bottoms up and top down. Top down, we'll look at kind of your enterprise and what are the scores of your key KPIs, for example, WMAP and bias. As we're tuning your system and refining the configuration and making choices, what's happening to your overall accuracy metrics? That's one. Bottoms up, we look at key individual products or key customers. What are high-selling products that are critical to the business, and how are the changes that are being made to the forecasting configuration impacting them? Looking at top offenders. Where is the error coming from? Are there specific highly problematic combinations that if you improve them, the whole enterprise-wide accuracy would improve? After all of that's done, then we'll generate some detailed reports about what we found, why and what was changed, and assist with an ROI and impact analysis of kind of what the tuning is going to bring, and as time progresses, what the realized impact to the business has been. The other kind that we've become more and more involved with, especially in the cloud, is training. There's a distinct lack of information and really strong training collateral out there about how the engine works, and how to best do NPI in the cloud, and other topics around ODMC. So we've taken up some of that mantle, and we provide detailed training, either remote or in person, about the topics that I've outlined here and other topics. That's usually been very successful, either educating the planning team, the IT, or a mix of the two. The other thing we offer, and that's something we've delved into fairly recently, are extensions to Oracle Demand Planning. The cloud, by virtue of being this walled garden, has a lot of benefits. You as customers don't have to maintain localized hardware anymore. You don't have to manage an upgrade cycle. That's all managed automatically. But as part of those benefits, you do lose some control. What you or your IT team used to be able to do, writing custom code that would connect to the database and extend the planning experience to better align with your needs, isn't available anymore. So Oracle has requested that us and other partners take up the mantle and create these PaaS offerings. They're essentially extensions. We have an extension now called Advanced Forecast Diagnostics that's on the Oracle Marketplace. And this extends the capabilities of the ODMC with additional capabilities. We've got 3 areas we focused on in our current offering: demand sensing, forecast accuracy, and segmentation, and I'll walk you through them pretty quickly. So demand sensing. A question that comes up a lot is, I've got my forecast for, let's say, the upcoming quarter. As demand comes in, it's not in line with my forecast. I need a way to quickly capture this, alert the planner, and let them actually take immediate actions to resolve that. And that's what demand sensing is all about. We look at a forecast for a period, whether it's a month, a quarter, or a year. We compare the inbound demand that's already occurred in that period and use our adaptive intelligence algorithm to determine if that demand is in line with the forecast that was in place. If it is, great. If it's not, we'll actually alert the planner. Essentially, this UI, which sucked in the information from the ODMC and showing it in this type of screen, will show you instances where there's a big gap between what was expected via the forecast and what really happened. Maybe you thought you were going to sell 1,000 units in a quarter, and after 3 weeks, you've already sold 850. Well, the planner needs to be notified and be able to take action. Maybe you're 10 weeks into the quarter. You thought you were going to sell 1,000 again. You've only sold 250. Well, maybe it'll materialize in the last 3 weeks of the quarter, but it probably won't. So it's time to adjust that forecast and take action. So that's what demand sensing is all about. Looking at very tactical, very actionable scenarios and helping the planner improve the forecast real time. The second area is forecast accuracy. So a challenge that lots of planners and lots of organizations have is, how do I take the most effective and most, let's say, beneficial tasks at the beginning of my planning cycle? I've got lots of products, lots of orgs, I've got a ton of combinations to scan. How do I focus on what's most impactful? That's what forecast accuracy does. Forecast accuracy shows what we call top offenders. For, let's say, every product category you have, it'll show you the products that are most impactful into what are driving your forecast error, whether it's quantity or dollars. Which are the products that are really impacting your enterprise accuracy values? Because sometimes, well, actually, not even sometimes, often enough, you might have 1 million product organization combinations. That's a lot of combinations. That's a ton of combinations to scan through. But when you look at the top 100 product org combinations where the error is highest, you realize that contributes to, 37% of your total error. That's a huge chunk in a very small group. So if you attack these 100 combinations first and improve their accuracy, your enterprise accuracy immediately shrinks pretty dramatically, and you get a ton of benefits. So this kind of the application shows you your top offenders, how much they contribute to your error. You can even simulate using that error reduction slider right up here. If I reduce my error for my top offenders, what is that going to do to my enterprise-wide error? And really allow the planner to focus on specific combinations when they're starting out their planning cycle, just to be more effective and take the most efficient actions to reduce forecast error. The last part of the past application is segmentation. There's several reasons you want to segment your demand world. Why? Because not all products are created equal. Some are high volume, some are low volume, some are high variability, some are low variability. Some you believe you don't need to touch every cycle, some you know you have to touch all the time. And that's where segmentation comes in. The ability to take your world and break it down into subgroups. And once you've broken them down, you can use those subgroups to filter your reports, to focus your planners, to actually customize your forecasting algorithms to forecast one segment one way and another segment another way. So we've created a tool that, based on business rules, whether it's volume or other calculations, depending on levels, let's say category and region, or product and org, you want to take each part of the business that you want to evaluate, you want to segment it and put it into a bucket, and then have access to that bucketization in ODMC, whether it's just an attribute or a level used to filter your reports or slice and dice your reports, or ever use it for something more complex like tuning or deciding which ones are going to go to supply planning. There's lots and lots of applications, but it's really important to have a tool that will let you actually segment your world. So that's what this is offering. All right. So now I'm going to open up the floor to, actually no. Before I open up the floor to questions, just a little bit about us. Analytical Factor has been around for 9 years. We've got resources in New York. I myself am based out of Vienna, Austria, and the majority of our team is based out of Israel. I've been with the Oracle ecosystem almost 20 years. And we also have Sharon Eliassi, who was the director of R&D for the Mantra, and also focusing on the statistical engine and a key part of the VCP sales team for the Mantra. We focus primarily on demand planning and trade planning, both in cloud and on-prem, and essentially our kind of special sauce or secret sauce is the fact that we focus on a specific set of topics. We are not, and we'll do whatever you want us to do, kind of provider. We focus on very specific topics, and we're the expert on these topics. So let me open up the floor to questions. Ariel, do you have any questions?
Sure. We have a question here. Where can I get the best accuracy, the Mantra or ODMC?
Okay, fantastic question. So both systems have a great statistical engine. The answer in my mind is wherever you can get your data into the easiest and get your planners to be most effective. In ODMC, you've got newer look and feel, you've got more kind of visualization capabilities, and that might appeal to your planners more. It also might be just better for your IT team. If you need a very specialized solution that's going to require a lot of extensions and customization, then the Mantra might be a better fit because it's not a hosted solution, so you've got more control. So really it comes down to wherever you can get your planners to be effective. Oracle is definitely investing more in the cloud these days, so the future is there. But if you're looking to be effective now, think about where are my planners going to just be more efficient and where can I give them the capabilities and solution they need. Anything else?
Yes. How often should I tune my statistical forecast?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So the research typically shows that because of changes to the business, changes to demand patterns, and just overall evolution in the world, which is accelerating all the time, if you've gone in and tuned the system and you leave it alone, you typically degrade between 0.5% to 1% a month. Meaning that if you got to a system that was 88% accurate after a tuning engagement, a year later, I wouldn't be surprised if you're around 80, 78, 80. So it gets worse over time. It's definitely worth evaluating your tuning every 6 months, I'd say 12 months at the most. the approach of let's tune once and let it sit for 3 years, it's quite common. It has a lot of pitfalls. Typically, by the time we talk to the customer 2 or 3 years later, they go, yeah, well, the forecast we're getting on the system is really not reliable or good anymore. We've acquired 2 divisions, we've normalized all our SKUs. Things are very, very different for us now. So the statistical engine just isn't well configured for our needs. So ideally, 6 to 12 months. Some companies even kind of have an internal team that kind of looks and attacks these things every cycle. They tweak, they change, they talk to experts, and they really stay on top of it. And those are the groups that have the best accuracy. I think we've got time for one more question.
Yes. What sort of accuracy improvement can I expect from a tuning engagement?
Oh, okay, that's hard. It really comes down to where you're starting at. If you're starting at and you're at 87% accuracy, you're not going to go to 98. You're going to go up to 90, 92. So it really comes down to where you start and how much information you've got to share. What do I mean by that? Demand has an explainable element and a non-explainable element. And typically the non-explainable element is also explainable. We just don't have insight to that. Why did the store sell 10 pairs of socks one day and 6 the next, and then 2 and then 15 again? Sometimes you go, we don't know, it's random. There's usually something underneath the surface that we just don't see or don't have access to. So if we can gain insights and information to what's driving your demand behavior and model it appropriately, we'll get a better impact. Rule of thumb is take your current error, reduce it by roughly a third. So if you're at 60% error, you'll go down to 40. If you're at 10% error, you'll go down to 7. That's a very rough rule of thumb. So it comes down to where are you now, how much you've already invested, and part of it is going to be talking to folks like us. We'll look at your data, we'll look at your configuration, and we'll say, yeah, you configured really well, we don't think we can do much for you, and that's fine. Sometimes it happens like that, and it's an honest answer. Often enough that we'll say, well, these are areas where we see the configuration not matching your business goals and not being best practice, and because of that, we think we can improve your accuracy by so much. All right, so we've come to the end of our time. We are going to be at Oracle Open World next week. So if you're there, please drop us a line. We'd love to meet up and talk demand planning, one of my favorite things to talk about. We're also going to have a webinar November 12th on how to extend demand management cloud with PaaS applications. Not just our PaaS applications, talk about just general capabilities that Oracle has around sending data in and out, whether you want to build it in-house with your IT team or leverage some external group to do it. We're going to talk about some of the capabilities and talk about how we've built a variety of applications. If you've got additional questions or things that you didn't think about now but you want to reach out to us, feel free to just reach out to us at info@analyticalfactor.com. All right. Hopefully you found this informative and interesting, and I wish you a good rest of your day.